Excerpts from The Politics of Ecstasy by everybody's favorite psychedelic guru, Tim Leary. What is the religious experience? The religious experience is the ecstatic and controvertibly certain subjective discovery of answers to 7 basic spiritual questions. There can be, of course, absolute subjective certainty in regard to secular questions. Is this the girl I love? Is Fidel Castro a wicked man? Are the Yankees the best baseball team? But issues which do not involve the 7 basic questions belong to secular games, and such convictions and faiths, however deeply held, can be distinguished from the religious. Liturgical practices, rituals, dogmas, theological speculations can be and too often are secular, completely divorced from the spiritual experience. What are these 7 basic spiritual questions? Number 1, the ultimate power question. What is the basic energy underlying the universe, the ultimate power that moves the galaxies and nucleus of the atom? Where and how did it all begin? What is the cosmic plan? This is cosmology. 2, the life question. What is life? Where and how did life begin? How is it evolving? Where is it going? Genesis, biology, evolution, and genetics. 3, the human being question. Who is man? Whence did he come? What is his structure and function? Anatomy, somatic knowledge, and physiology. Number 4, the awareness question. How does man sense, experience, know? This is epistemology and neurology. 5, the ego question. Who am I? What is my spiritual, psychological, social place in the plan? What should I do about it? Social psychology. I repeat, that's social psychology. 6, the emotional question. What should I feel about it? Psychiatry, personality psychology. 7, the ultimate escape question related to ecstasy. How do I get out of it? Anesthesiology, amateur or professional. Eschatology. Anesthesiology and anesthesia relate to the unconscious. We are all aware of the unhappy fact that both science and religion are too often diverted towards secular game goals. Various pressures demand that laboratory and church forget these basic 7 questions and instead provide distractions, illusory protection, narcotic comfort. Most of us dread confrontation with the answers to these basic questions, whether the answers come from objective science or religion. But if pure science and religion address themselves to the same basic questions, what is the distinction between the 2 disciplines? Science is the systematic attempt to record and measure the energy process and the sequence of energy transformations we call life. The goal is to answer the basic questions in terms of objective, observed, public data from the outside, externally. Religion is the systematic attempt to provide answers to the same 7 questions subjectively, in terms of direct, incontrovertible, internal personal experience. A science which fails to address itself to these spiritual goals, which accepts other purposes, however popular, becomes secular, political, and tends to oppose new data. A religion which fails to provide direct experiential answers to these spiritual questions, which fails to produce the ecstatic high, becomes secular, political, and tends to oppose the individual revelatory confrontation. While it can be certainly said that rationalism in the modern era of spiritual man has taken much more than its toe forward, especially in the West, it still holds true that subjective spiritual experience cannot stand alone in any sound philosophy without a necessary balance of scientific rational analysis and backup to keep it from becoming too heady, too airy-fairy and groundless. The Oxford Orientalist R.C. Zahner has remarked that experience, when divorced from dogma and ritual, often leads to absurd and wholly irrational excesses. That's irrational excesses. Now, like any statement of polarity, the opposite is equally true. Dogma, when divorced from experience and subjective internal insight, often leads to absurd and wholly rational excesses. At this point, I should like to advance the hypothesis that those aspects of the psychedelic experience which subjects report to be ineffable and ecstatically religious involve a direct awareness of the energy processes which physicists and biochemists, physiologists and neurologists, and psychologists and psychiatrists measure. We are treading here on very tricky ground. When we read the reports of LSD subjects, we are doubly limited. First, they can only speak in the vocabulary they know, and for the most part, they do not possess the lexicon and training of energy scientists. Second, we researchers find only what we are prepared to look for, and too often we think in crude psychological jargon concepts, moods, emotions, value judgments, diagnostic categories, social pejoratives, religious cliches, etc. Since 1962, I have talked to thousands of LSD trippers, mystics, sadhus, occultists, and saints, inquiring if their hallucinations and visions, revelations, ecstasies, orgasms, hits, flashes, spaceouts, and freakouts can be translated into the language not just of religion, psychiatry, and psychology, but also of the physical and biological sciences. The 7 spiritual questions. 1. The ultimate power question. The scientific answers to this question change constantly. Newtonian laws, quantum indeterminacy, atomic structure, nuclear structure. Today, the basic energy is located within the nucleus, inside the atom. Incredible power and complexity, operating at speeds and spatial dimensions which our conceptual minds cannot register. Infinitely small, yet pulsating outward through enormous networks of electrical forces. Atom, molecule, cell, planet, star. All forms dancing to the nuclear tune. The cosmic design is this network of energy whirling through space-time. More than 15,000 million years ago, the oldest known stars began to form, whirling disks of gas molecules, driven, of course, by that tiny spinning nuclear force. There's 1 billion galaxies, and there's 100 million to 100 billion stars per galaxy. That is to say, 100 billion planetary systems per galaxy. And each planetary system slowly wheels through the stellar cycle that allows for a brief time the possibility of life as we know it. Psychedelic subjective correlates. Subjects speak of participating in and merging with pure, i.e. content-free energy, white light, of witnessing the breakdown of macroscopic objects into vibratory patterns, visual nets, the collapse of external structure into wave patterns, the awareness that everything is a dance of particles, sensing the smallness and fragility of our system, visions of the void, of world-ending explosions, of the cyclical nature of creation and dissolution, etc. Now, I need not apologize for the flimsy inadequacy of these words. We just don't have a better experiential vocabulary. If God were to permit you a brief voyage into the divine process, let you whirl for a second into the atomic nucleus, or spin you out on a light-year trip through the galaxies, how on earth would you describe what you saw when you got back, breathless, to your office? This metaphor may sound far-fetched or irrelevant, but just ask someone who's taken a few doses of LSD. We just don't have a better experiential vocabulary for these experiences. Question 2, the life question. The Earth spun for about 60% of its existence without life. The crust slowly cooled and was eroded by incessant water flow after the spinning of billion years of molten hot rock which formed it. Fertile mineral mud was deposited, now giving for the first time the possibility of harboring life. Thunderbolts in the mud produce amino acids, the basic building blocks of life. Then begins the ceaseless production of protein molecules, incalculable in number, forever combining into new forms. Then comes protoplasm, the cell. Within the cell, incredible beauty and order coexist. When we consider the teeming activity of a modern city, it is difficult to realize that in the cells of our bodies, infinitely more complicated processes are at work. Ceaseless manufacture, acquisition of food, storage, communication, and administration, All this takes place in superb harmony with the cooperation of all the participants of a living system, regulated down to the smallest detail. Life is the striving cycle of repetitious, reproductive energy transformations, moving, twisting, devouring, changing. The unit of life is the cell, and the blueprint is the genetic code, the two nucleic acids, the long intertwined duplicating chains of DNA and controlling regulation of RNA, which determine the structure of the living substance. And where is it going? Exactly like the old Hindu myths of cyclical rotation, the astrophysicists tell us that life is a temporary sequence which occurs at a brief midpoint in the planetary cycle. The flame of life, which moves every living form, including the cell cluster you call yourself, began, we are told, as a tiny single-celled spark in the lower Precambrian mud, then passed over in steady transformations to more complex forms. We like to speak of higher forms, but let's not ignore or patronize the single-cell game. It's still quite thriving, thank you. Every cell in your body traces back about 450 million years ago to the same light life flickering an amphibian. What a fateful and questionable decision to leave the sea. Should we have done it? Then forms, multiplying in endless diversity, reptile, insect, bird, until 1 million years ago comes the aureole glory of Australopithecus. The psychedelic correlates of these evolutionary and genetic concepts are to be found in the reports of almost every LSD tripper. The experience of being a one-celled creature tenaciously flailing, the singing, humming sound of life exfoliating. You are the DNA code spinning out multicellular aesthetic solutions. The psychedelic experience is the Hindu Buddha reincarnation theory experimentally confirmed in your own nervous system. You re-experience your human forebears, shuttle down the chain of DNA remembrance. It's all there in your cellular diaries. You are the endless chain of warm-blooded, sweating, perfumed-smelling, tenaciously struggling primates, each rising out of darkness to stand for 1 second in the sunlight and hand on the precious electrical tissue flame of life. Our Father, who art protein in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So what does all this evolutionary reincarnation business have to do with us, or LSD, or the religious experience? It might have a lot to do with very current events. Many LSD subjects say they experience early forms of racial or subhuman species evolution during their sessions. Now, the easiest interpretation is the psychiatric. Oh yes, hallucinations. Everyone knows that LSD makes you crazy, and your delusions can take any psychotic form. But wait. Not so fast. Is it entirely inconceivable that our cortical cells, or the machinery inside the cellular nucleuses, remember back along the unbroken chain of electrical transformations that connect every one of us back to that original thunderbolt in the Precambrian mud? Impossible, you say? Read a genetics text. Read and reflect about the DNA chain of complex protein molecules that took you as a unicelled organism at the moment of your conception and planned every stage of your natural development. Think about it. 3. The human being question. The scientific answer. What is the human being? Ancient riddle usually answered from within the homocentric limits of the parochial mind. But consider this question from the perspective of an intelligence outside the romantic fallacy of man's superiority. Study the question from the vantage point of an outer space visitor. Like every living creature, man is a seed carrier, a soul bearer, made in one of the forms of God. Man's particular form is a bag of semi-hairless skin containing a miraculously complex system of life functions. He is more than 99% automated, and he is only a very small fraction conscious. Subjective psychedelic correlates. One of the ecstatic horrors of the LSD experience is the sudden confrontation with your own body, the shattering resurrection of your body. You are capitulated into the matrix of quadrillions of cells and somatic communication systems. Cellular flow. You are swept down the tunnels and canals of your own waterworks. visions of microscopic processes, strange undulating tissue patterns, pummeled down the fantastic artistry of internal factories, recoiling with fear or shrieking in pleasure at the incessant push, struggle, and drive of the biological machinery, clicking endlessly, at every moment engulfing you. Your body is the universe. The ancient wisdom of Gnostics, Hermetics, Sufis, Tantric gurus, yogis, occult healers. They all knew this. What is without is within. What is without is within. Your body is the mirror of the macrocosm. The kingdom of heaven is within you, within your body. The great psychedelic philosophies of the East, Tantra, Kundalini Yoga, see the human body as the sacred temple, the seed center, the exquisitely architected shrine of all creation. Hoc est corpus meum. This is my body. Hoc est corpus meum. And the systematic, disciplined awareness of body function is the basic sacramental method of these religions. Tibetan and Indian Tantra train the student to become faithful to somatic experience, to pay attention to the energies and messages of the body. Breathing, control of circulation, and control of involuntary muscles and reflexes, digestion and genital erection and ejaculation, awareness of the intricate languages of hormone and humor, and the psychopharmacology of the body, the chakras. One cannot understand the rhythms and meanings of the outer world until one has mastered these dialects of the body. One cannot understand the rhythms and meanings of the outer world until one has mastered the dialects of the body. What is man? He is within his body. His body is his universe. 4. The awareness question. The scientific answer. Everything that man knows is mediated by the human nervous system. Everything that man knows about the external world and his place, his identity in it, comes through the sense organs. All our beliefs and convictions about the existence of an outside world, the only threads we have that connect our lonely solipsism to the other forms of life and energy and consciousness out there, quote unquote, are based on data registered on our sensory radar and processed by our brains. The psychedelic subjective correlate to this awareness question should now be apparent. On the rather dour side, the attentive, highly conscious person realizes that he is the almost helpless victim of the accidental or deliberate range of light, sound, pressure, chemical energies that impinge on his sensory nerve endings. The world is a cosmically predetermined energy mechanization, simple mathematical runoff. Sensory conditioning has forced us to accept a reality, which is a comic, tragic farce illusion. On the bright side, we can obtain a momentary and even longer release from the neurological prison with psychedelics. We can come to our senses, turn off the conditioning, and experience afresh the hardly bearable ecstasy of direct energy exploding on our nerve endings. We can become seers, heroes, Hearoes, smelling tasters in real touch. The awakening of the senses is the most basic aspect of the psychedelic experience. This is the Zen moment of Satori, the nature mystic's high, the sudden centering of consciousness on the sense organ, the realization that this is it. I am here, I knows, I am in contact. The ability to turn on the senses, to escape the conditioned mind, to throb in harmony with the energies radiating on the sense organs, the skillful control of one's senses, has for thousands of years been the mark of a sage, a holy man, a radiant teacher. Control of the senses is a basic part of every enduring religious method. Control does not mean repression or closing off. Control means the ability to turn off the mind, ignore the enticing clamor of symbolic seduction, and open the senses like flowers, accepting like sunshine the gift of those energies which man's senses are designed to receive. 5. The ego question. Scientific answer. Who am I? Basic question, and invariably and eagerly and insistently answered by social institutions, always for their own benefit. Every religious hierarchy can tell you who you are: Catholic, Protestant, Jew, or atheist, right? And every government agrees you're an American or a Russian or a Turk. Let's see your passport. And the endless, lesser, monolithic social agencies tell you who you are: occupation, recreation, political affiliation, social class, status, branch of service. This is the great ego identity quest, the national personality sweepstakes, the image game. This is the shallow, transient, secular evasion of the physical and metaphysical identity. Who am I? The perspective on this question comes only when you step off the TV stage set defined by mass media social psychology adjustment normality. I exist at every level of energy and every level of consciousness. Who am I? I'm you. At the atomic level, I am a galaxy of nuclear-powered atoms spinning through changing patterns. I am the universe, the center and guardian temple of all energy. I am God of light. Who am I? I'm you. At the cellular level, I am the entire chain of life. I am the key rung of the DNA ladder, center of the evolutionary process, the current guardian of the seed, the now I of the 2 billion-year-old uncoiling serpent. I am the God of life. I'm you. At the somatic level, I am my body, the most intricate, intelligent, complex form of energy structure. The network of my organs and tissues is the last word in cosmic miniaturization, celestial packaging. I am the resurrection of the body. I'm you. At the sensory level, I am the divine receiving station, the sacred communication satellite, a two-legged, trembling tissue radar telescope, dancing, grumbling, sniffing, a billion sensory microphones picking up vibrations from planetary energy systems. I am God of common sense. I'm you. But there's an added feature. Each generation, I, the timeless God, atom bearer, seed carrier, return in a new, improved Detroit model electric eye, horseless, carry-all body pushed on a new social stage set. I am an American. I was an Irish farmer. I was a Celtic minstrel. I was this one and that one. Each time carried on stage, blinking, puking, bawling, bewildered by the bizarre novelty of each new drama, untutored in the language of the new script. Did she say her name was Mommy? Unaware of the plot, each time having forgotten any atomic, cellular, somatic, sensory divinity, each time painfully being pushed and hauled into some ludicrous, histrionic consistency known today as my personality, known yesterday as karma. Thus, I am the undeniably psychological unit, a mind, a box of conditioned Pavlovian reflexes, a social robot, here adjusted, there maladjusted, sometimes good or approved of, sometimes bad or censored. The center of my psychological mandala, the mainspring of my personality, is social conditioning, reward and punishment. What will the neighbors think is the beginning and end of modern psychology. Now, who am I? I'm you. I'm Timothy What's-His-Name. I am the Reader's Digest's likes and dislikes. This commitment of ego consciousness to the social game is inevitable and cannot be eliminated despite the poignant appeals to drop out. We cannot drop out of society. We can only drop out of social roles and dramas which are unloving, contracting, and which distract us from the discovery of our atomic, cellular, somatic, and sensory divinity. Spiritual appeals to transcend the ego are vain. Like any other level of consciousness of energy, ego is. Karma is. All we can do is center ego consciousness and see it in proper relationship to the other eyes. The social ego is abysmally trivial when compared to the atomic I, the DNA I, but that's the glorious humor of the cosmic hide and seek. That social ego can possess such eccentric, foolish power to camouflage the other divinities that lie beneath our skin. So let us pray. Almighty ego, set I free. Almighty ego, let my eyes see. The impact of LSD is exactly this brutal answer to the question, who is ego? In a word, ego discovers that ego is a fraudulent actor in a fake show, rubber stamp and tinsel. Ego discovers that I is atomic, cellular, sensory, somatic, and soon to pass on. Ego gets frightened, panicked. Ego cries for help. Get me a psychiatrist. Help! Get me back to the nice, comforting TV stage. The LSD revelation is the clear perspective. The LSD panic is the terror that ego is lost forever. The LSD ecstasy is the joyful discovery that ego, with its pitiful shams and strivings, is only a fraction of my identity. 6. The emotional question. The scientific answer. What should I move toward? What direction my motion? What should I feel? The emotional and feeling questions. Here science fails miserably to give us answers because there is little objective data, and the accepted theories of emotional behavior, the psychiatric, are naive, inadequate, and pompously trivial. The best-known theory of emotions, the Freudian, is a hodgepodge of platitude, banality, and rabbinical piety. Where do we go to find the scientific answer to the emotional question? Can you really bear to know? Emotions are the lowest form of consciousness. Emotional actions are the most contracted, narrowing, dangerous form of behavior. The romantic poetry and fiction of the last 200 years has quite blinded us to the fact that emotions are an active and harmful form of stupor. Any peasant can tell you that. Beware of emotions. Any child can tell you that. Watch out for the emotional person. He's a lurching lunatic. Emotions are caused by biochemical secretions in the body to serve during the state of acute emergency. An emotional person is a blind, crazed maniac. Emotions are addictive and narcotic and stupefacient. Do not trust anyone who comes on emotional. Emotions are all based on fear. Like an alcoholic or a junkie, the frightened person reaches for his favorite escape into action. Commanding, competing, punishing, aggressing, rebelling, complaining, abasing, submitting, placating, agreeing, fawning, flattering, giving. The emotional person cannot think. He cannot perform any effective game action. The emotional person is turned off sensually. His body is a churning robot. He has lost all connection with cellular wisdom or atomic revelation. The person in an emotional state is an inflexible robot gone berserk. What psychologists call love is emotional greed and self-enhancing gluttony based on fear. B. The psychedelic correlate. The only state in which we can learn, harmonize, grow, merge, understand is the absence of emotion. This is called bliss or ecstasy, attained through centering the emotions. Moods such as sorrow and joy accompany emotions. Like a junkie who has just scored or an alcoholic with a bottle in hand, the emotional person feels good when he has scored emotionally, i.e., beaten someone up or been beaten up, won a competitive victory, gorged himself on personal grabbing. Conscious love is not an emotion. It is serene merging with yourself, with other people, with other forms of energy. Love cannot exist in an emotional state. Only the person who has been psychotic or had a deep psychedelic trip can understand what emotions do to the human being. The great kick of the mystic experience, the exultant, ecstatic hit, is the sudden relief from emotional pressure. Did you imagine that there could be emotions in heaven? Emotions are closely tied to ego games, like a stone. Check your emotions at the door to paradise. Why then are emotions built into the human repertoire if they are so painful, demanding, and blinding? There is a basic survival purpose. Emotions are the emergency alarms. The organism at the point of death terror goes into a paroxysm of frantic activity, like a fish flipping blindly out of water, like a crazed, cornered animal. There are rare times when emotions are appropriate and relevant, a reflex biochemical spurt, flight or fight. But the sensible animal avoids situations which elicit fear and the accompanying emotion. Your wise animal prefers to relax or to play, using his senses tuned into his delicious body organ music, closing his eyes to drift back in cellular memory. Dogs and cats are high all the time, except when bad luck demands emotional measures. The emotional human being is an evolutionary drug addict, continuously and recklessly shooting himself up with adrenaline and other dark ferments. The way to turn off the emotions is to turn on the senses, turn on to your body, turn on your cellular reincarnation circus, turn on to the electric glow within, and engage only in turn-on ego games. 7. The ultimate escape question, the scientific answer. The question is, how does it end? The answer is, it doesn't. Ask any scientist, no matter which level of energy he studies, and he'll tell you it keeps going at the same beat. On, off, atomic. Galaxies flash on and then off. Cellular. Species flare out and then retract. Somatic. The heart beats and stops. The lungs inhale and exhale. Sensory. Light comes in waves of particles hurtling against retinal beaches. High tide, we see. Low tide, we don't see. The neural message dot dashes along the nerve fibers. Light, dark. Sound waves pile up on the auditory membrane and fall back. Sound, silence. There is no form of energy which does not come in the same rhythm. Yin, yang. In, out. The galaxy itself and every structure within it is a binary business, an oscillating dance. Start, stop. There is only one level of consciousness that cannot accept the universal on-off switch, and that is the ego. Ego is unable to learn from the past or to predict the obvious events of the future because of its deep dread of confronting mortality. Ego focuses consciousness on the few immediately neighboring pieces of the game board because ego knows that one glance across the game board or beyond puts the whole thing in perspective, where it began and how it will end. Start, stop, off, on. The Buddha's loving parents tried to make sure their son would not consider the 4 chess pieces that lead off the game board: sickness, age, death, and the magician guru. Oriental philosophy points out that every form is an illusion, Maya. Everything at every level of energy is a shuttling series of vibrations as apparently solid as the whirring metal disc made by rotating fan blades. Ego resists this notion and touches the immediate solidity of phenomena. We dislike slowing the motion picture down because the film flickers. Annoying reminder that we view not unbroken continuity, but an off-on ribbon of still pictures. Life is an illusion. There 1 second, gone the next. Now you see it, now you don't. Death is equally illusory. Suicide a farce. The desire to escape is exactly as pointless as the desire to hang on to life. How can you clutch onto or escape from a relentless click-clack process that continues despite the mind's interpretation? And despite our feelings about it. Hell is the idea that the game switch won't turn off. Suicide is the deluded attempt to escape from hell. Hell is a mistake in judgment, a bum trip idea, the ego's stranglehold on the film projector. Ego is caught in a repetitious loop, over and over and over. Suicide is the escape from ego. Only ego contemplates escape. Can you imagine an animal killing itself in egocentric peak? Ego attempts to turn itself off through anesthesia, unconsciousness, fast suicide, or slow narcosis. Alcohol dulls the mind game and produces emotional stupor. Too much alcohol provides the anesthetic escape. Have you ever talked to an articulate junkie? The appeal of heroin is the void, the warm, soft cocoon of nothingness, surcease. Easeful death, the vacuum gamble. The game of the junkie is to nod out, to pass over the line into unconsciousness. The last thought of the junkie as he slips away is, have I gone too far this time? Overdose? Au revoir or goodbye? B. The psychedelic correlate. The deep psychedelic experience is a death-rebirth flip. You turn on to the ancient rhythm and you become its beat. All right now, are you ready? The whole thing is about to click off. The successful mystic is he who goes with it, lets it happen. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Oh my God, you again? The bad trip, the LSD panic, is the terrorized reluctance to go with it, frantic grabbing for the intangible switch. Ego cries, "Keep it on!" The glory of the psychedelic moment is the victory over life and death, won by seeing the oscillating dance of energy and yielding to it. Yielding to the oscillating dance of energy. The age-old appeal of the psychedelic experience is its solution to the problem of escape. The visionary revelation answers the escape question. There is no death. Ecstatic, mirthful relief. There is nothing to avoid, nothing to escape, nothing to fear. There is just off on, in out, start, stop, light, dark, flash, delay. Death, void, oblivion is the split-second pause. I accept the on, I accept the off. It is of interest that the heroin addict and the illuminated Buddha end up at the same place, the void. The junkie is a deeply religious person. The alcoholic is, too. Thus, our physicians and psychiatrists have no luck in curing addicts. If you see an addict as a social misfit, a civic nuisance who must be rehabilitated, you're completely missing the point. To cure the junkie and the alcoholic, you accept the cosmic validity of his search to transcend the game, and you help him see that blackout drugs are just bad methodology because you just can't keep holding the off switch, and that the way to reach the void is through psychedelic rather than anesthetic experience. Drugs are the religion of the people. The only hope is dope. From the theological standpoint, everybody must discover the seven faces of God within his own body. Each level of energy requires its own methods and language. The entire study of consciousness, the religious experience itself, remains in a state of medieval ignorance and superstition. There is no language for describing states of awareness. Religious scholars and theologians quarrel, not just about moral fads and ritual paraphernalia, but, more basically, about the answers to the seven basic questions. The humanistic sciences, neurology, psychology, psychiatry, psychopharmacology, and the study of consciousness, which I call religion, require a systematic language which will allow men to distinguish which levels of energy and consciousness they deal with. It is rather unfortunate that Western man developed a language of physics and chemistry and a highly efficient engineering based on physical-chemical experimentation long before he developed understanding and control of his own sense organs and neurological conditioning. Thus, we now have a situation where blind, irrational, technical robots who understand neither their makeup nor the purpose of life are in control of powerful and dangerous energies. A conversation with Alan Watts. Alan, what is the purpose of life? That is the question. What do you mean? The question of life is to ask the question, what is the purpose of life? Is to ask the question, what is the purpose of life? Is to ask the question, what is the purpose of life? The only purpose of life is the religious quest, the religious question. But you must be careful how you put the question, because the level at which you ask is the level at which you will be answered. I've suggested 7 levels of energy and consciousness, which are based on the anatomy or structure of the human body and its constituent parts: neurological, somatic, cellular, molecular. The religions of the future must be based on these 7 scientific questions. A science of consciousness must be based on those different levels, which center on the body and the biochemicals, i.e. drugs, which alter consciousness. So as has been already stated, from the theological standpoint, everyone must discover the 7 faces of God within his own body. This task, which at first glance may seem fantastically utopian, is actually very easy to initiate because there now exist instruments which can move consciousness to any desired level. The laboratory equipment for experimental theology, for internal science, is of course made of the stuff of consciousness itself, made of the same material as the data to be studied. The instruments of systematic religion are chemicals, drugs, dope. If you are serious about your religion, if you really wish to commit yourself to the spiritual quest, you must learn how to use psychochemicals. The message of religion, when approached hypothetically or rationally, is dimly grasped and never experienced, felt, or known. But there can be that staggering intellectual game ecstasy which comes to you when you begin to sense the complexity of the plan. To pull back the veil and see for a second a fragment of the energy dance, the life power. How can you appreciate the divine unless you comprehend the smallest part of the fantastic design? To experience, it's always for just a moment, the answers to the 7 basic spiritual questions is to me the peak of the religious scientific quest. Drugs are the religion of the 21st century. Pursuing the religious life today without using psychedelic drugs is like studying astronomy with the naked eye, because that's how they did it in the 1st century AD. If God were to take you on a visit through his workshop, do you think you'd walk or go by bus? Do you really think it would be a stroll through a celestial Madame Tussauds waxworks? Dear friends, the divine product is evident in every macroscopic form in every secular event. The divine product we can see, but the divine process operates in time dimensions which are far beyond our routine, secular, space-time limits. Wave vibrations, energy dance, cellular transactions. Our science describes this logically. Our brains may be capable of dealing with these processes experientially. So here we are. The great process has placed in our hands a key to this direct visionary world. Is it hard for us to accept that the key might be an organic molecule and not a new myth or a new word? There is, of course, the expected opposition, the classic conflict of the religious drama, always changing, always the same. The doctrine, which was originally someone's experience, now threatened by the new experience. As educated men with an eye for history, you are, I trust, beginning to suspect that we've been through this many times before. The 7 tongues of God and their psychedelic correlates. Number 7, the anesthetic state is produced by narcotics, barbiturates, and large doses of alcohol. Anyone can reach the void just by self-administration of stupefactions. Most Americans know just how to pass out. 6. The state of emotional stupor is produced by moderate doses of alcohol. 3 martinis do nicely. 5. The state of ego consciousness is enhanced by pep pills, energizers consumed daily by millions of Americans. Pep pills make you feel good, make you feel active. They change nothing, but they propel you into game motion. Coffee, tea, and Coca-Cola are mild versions. 4. The state of sensory awareness is produced by any psychedelic drug. LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, MDA, yahe, hashish, Serenil, DMT. But the specific direct trigger for turning on the senses is marijuana. 3. The state of somatic awareness is attained by any psychedelic drug stronger than marijuana, but the specific triggers for chakra consciousness are hashish and MDA. 2. The cellular level of consciousness is attained by any of the stronger psychedelics, peyote, LSD, mescaline, psilocybin. 1. The atomic electronic level of consciousness is produced by the most powerful psychedelics, LSD, STP, DMT. In conclusion, I will say that your brain is your own. Intelligent, open collaboration can expand your mind with words and with drugs. Only ignorance and misinformation can allow someone else to control it, with their own words, with their own drugs, or with their imaginary fears. We are least vulnerable and strongest when we are well informed. Facts are the defense against any weapon, and particularly the psychological weapons of fear and helplessness. So keep yourself well informed, keep your consciousness turned on, and always remember, just say KNOW. Just say no.